So the topic for today is procedures, and we'll see how do we define those procedures, how do we build custom procedures, considering the example that we talked about, that one person develops a part of the program and another person adds it into his program. How do we do that? And then utilizing the detail removal and generalization to construct these blocks that construct these blocks that actually lets you do these two concepts, that lets you remove the detail that you don't want, and that lets you generalize the processes that you do in your program. So please take 2 minutes to write this in your journals.
All right, I think we're done writing, Mr. Doomer.
So you remember this variable category where we used to define our variables? So that category has another option which says make a block. So what this does is, let's say I create a block. This block lets you identify the set of instructions that you can reuse in your program. For example, take the example of when we were drawing the shapes, right? We were drawing, firstly, if you draw a square, what do you need to do? You need to move your sprite in one direction, draw it for a certain length, and then move it 90 degree, and then draw it in a certain length, and then move it 90 degree, and then move, draw, and then move, right? So 4 times you repeat those set of instructions. We used to do repeat block. One option is you can actually use a repeat block. Another option is you can make a block of itself and then just define that and reuse it wherever you need it. For example, here I define a block which says, okay, show a message. I define this block for all the sprites. These are the options. We can talk more about these in details, but for now, there are 2 options you can do. Is you can define a block for all the sprites. That means any sprite can use this block, or you can do it only for the particular sprite that you're defining it for. That means any other sprite will not be able to see this block, and just the sprite that has the definition will be able to use it. And when I do that, I get to this block where this is the name of the block that I defined. Show message is the name that I defined, right? So let's say in that I want to define that say hello for 2 seconds. Okay, and if I do that, and in my sprite I can just call that, let's say I want to reuse it, and I can define multiple statements in this. So let's say if I click on this, it will just do what is exactly defined in the block. Let's say if I right click on this and I say edit and I add more commands to that. Let's say I say move the sprite 10 steps. If I do that and now I click on it, it is moving 10 steps, but it's not that prominent. So let me increase the size so that everybody can see that. Okay. Somehow this is not what it's supposed to. Okay. It's not moving. Oh, okay. So it's waiting for 2 minutes and then moving that. Let me just fix it. So I move it first and then let it say hello, otherwise it doesn't execute rest of the instructions for next 2 seconds. So once I do that, it will move my sprite and then it will say hello for 2 seconds. It'll move my sprite and then says say hello. So that way I'm just defining, I'm defining X number of instructions. I can add like 10 instructions in that block, and eventually I just need to execute only 1 instruction. So I can just use the show message and whatever instructions are defined in that block will be executed. So I don't need to worry about those. So how does this bring abstraction is that, for example, if I say, okay, Chase, you develop the program how to make the sprite jump, and Angel, you define how do you make the sprite walk, and when you hit W, you make the sprite jump. So you don't need to worry about how the jump is happening. So Angel just worries about when the W is clicked, the sprite is jumping. And Chase is just taking care of how the jump happens, whether it's just horizontally, whether it's horizontally and vertically. Every detail of jump is handled by Chase, and Angel is just worrying about adding that to the program and not really trying to see where the details are. So what he needs to do is he just needs to define a block like show message. He can define a block jump, and then just use that to just add it in the program, and he'll be good to go. Any number of times he wants to use this block, he can just use that, and one statement will do the magic. He doesn't need to write all those statements again and again. He can just reuse them. So take this example. If I have a program that I want to use, say when I click on a space key, then this show message should show up, and when I click on, let's say, any other button as well, H, then also show message should show up. In this case, I don't need to write the whole set of instructions what is included in the show message. I can just add the show message command here, and everything in the middle of it, whatever was defined for show message, will automatically be executed. This way your code is cleaner, it's smaller, understandable. So you really don't need to worry about defining everything and making it look like a huge giant program when it is doing the same thing again and again. Now let's take the example in if, let's say, Chase developed this show message thing, and let's say Brandon comes to him and say, hey, I want to reuse your show message, and but the problem is I don't want my sprite to move 60 steps. I want it to move just 30 steps. Can you give me a copy of your program? Now Chase is an option. He can say, you know what, okay, let me do one thing. I want to earn money. I get paid for every program I distributed. So I'll copy the program and I'll give it to you and change it to 30 steps every time. Fine, it'll work and Chase gets paid. But there is a copy of the program. And now if tomorrow, let's say, Daniel comes and Daniel says, I want to reuse it, but I want it to move 100 steps. Chase can make a copy of it and give for 100 steps. But the problem it is creating is that Chase has like 10 copies of the programs he's distributed. Firstly, he has to track where he has distributed it. And whenever he needs to make a change, let's say he says, you know what, the hello world is not looking good. I need to change it to hello world. He now needs to go to every person he has distributed his program and make a fix, which is not the right thing to do, right? So what's a better option? If I want to, do you have any ideas how do I make it customized to the consumer needs? For example, if I say tomorrow if Andy comes to me and says, I want it for 120 steps, I don't need to change my program, and my program works exactly the same the way it works, and their personal needs are taken care of. Any ideas how do I do that?
Use a variable.
Use variables, yeah. How do I use variables? Can I think I would have a variable defined. I have a variable defined arg1. Can I just use it here?
Yep.
I can use it, right? That is one option. And in the next class, we'll talk about what is the difference between using a variable here and the other method we are going to talk about. So variable is the right answer. It is one thing we can do. Definitely, that is a very good option you can use. Other option is when you define these custom blocks. The idea is we want these blocks to be self-sufficient. There are chances we will use variables. Don't get me wrong. Variables are super important part of it. Variables can be used, and there are different scenarios when you use variable and when you don't use variables. We'll talk about those in details. You can just use variable and say, hey, move it to 20 steps, or you can define a variable of your own in this block by clicking on this right plus key. Did you see when I hover my mouse over plus, it actually turns it into a circle, and when I click on it, it gives me an option to input a name. And let's say I say, okay, step count. If I define that and I let that as an argument. Now this is not called variable when it actually comes in the block. It is called an argument. So argument is something that is defined in the block and it is in the context of the block itself. And when it's from outside, you define it from here, this is a variable. We'll talk about the differences, but for now just understand these are two different terms. Okay, so with this change, what will happen is I can say, hey, make it as a step count. Now this way, whatever the user says, my sprite will move only to the steps that the user wants it to. I can do now you see in the show message, it has actually created a blank here. Previously this blank was not here in the show message block. Now it has added this blank. So let's say if Stephanie wants to reuse it for 100 steps, she can just put 100 and say, hey, when I click H, move it to 100, which is what she did. Let's do it again, and it's moving 100 steps. Okay. Let's say if Daniel wants to use it and say, I just want 50 steps, and he defines it with a space 1. So actually with space we have two things. Let's define it with something else. G. Okay. So with G, what will happen is, what the heck? So now you see when I'm clicking G, it's actually moving 50 steps, and when I click on H, it's moving 100 steps. My program remains the same. My show block definition is exactly the same. What I'm changing is the parameter in it. So what I've done is essentially what this helps me do, and what this actually helps Tyson do is, it lets you edit the program, let the people make it customized to their needs, and Tyson just had to write it once. He get paid for writing it once, and he get paid for number of times people use it, but he had to write it just once. So he's earning more money just by doing the work once, and that's all we want, right? So you can make your programs customizable just by adding an argument. Any questions on this concept of arguments and the blocks?
Any questions?
What do you think will be the benefit of using these custom blocks?
It'll make your script smaller.
Yes, it'll make your program smaller. What else?
A little bit more organized.
It'll be more organized. Absolutely, that's totally right. Any other advantage?
Read.
Sorry?
Easy to read.
Easy to read, absolutely. It's going to be easy to read. What else?
Easy to change.
Absolutely, that's the biggest advantage. Easy to change. So, especially in a big organizations, if you consider, it is it happens all the time that especially these kind of blocks like show messages and all are reused like 10,000 times by 10,000 different people. And if with the scale of 10,000 people using just same function, it's so easy to change it just once and make sure that this change is reflected at all the places that we've used it, because we can't use the 10,000 times where it is used, right? We just can make sure only one copy of that is reused everywhere is okay, and if the change is made in that copy, everybody else get that change. So that's the key advantage of it. Okay. So we do have 10 minutes. So let's do one thing. We will do lab tomorrow. Obviously, we won't have any class. We'll do the lab on Wednesday or Thursday. Today we'll just cover one more concept, which is the difference between variables and the arguments. Let's say I create a variable which is variable 1. And in the show message, I have I firstly change this to variable 1 to 100. And when I use this show message, I can use variable 1 or I can use a custom value. So in my let's remove this for now and go to the definition of show message. In the show message, instead of step count, I can say remove that. I don't need that actually. And let's replace this with variable. Just remove it. Oh god. Okay. So in this, I've used, I messed this up. In this, I've used variable 1, which I defined in the main program. So you saw I set the variable 1 value to 100, and I'm now calling this function. So when my show message is called, I'm not passing anything right now, right? So does this make any difference now if I'm adding any value to this or not? Will my program, the way it executes, change if I enter 50 instead of 100?
No.
No, right? Why?
Because your variable is set for 100, so it doesn't matter if you put anything else.
Absolutely. My variable is set and it is set outside my block, right? So my variable is defined outside, and then the program execution enters this block and it's picking up variable here. So what will happen if I use step count here? My step count is totally defined, it's totally customizable, right? I can change the value of step count by just entering a different value here. I can say 20, 10, whatever, and my program will change, right? So based on this understanding, what do you think are the difference between variable and an argument?
An argument you could change in the way argument.
Sorry, please say that loudly.
An argument you could change, and then the variable.
Yes, it's so basically what is happening is argument is something, well, you can change variable as well, but you know the context of these two, variable and argument, is different. So you saw when we defined variable was defined outside the program, and then we entered the block. In the block, the value of the variable was totally coming from outside. Value of the variable can change outside itself. We don't know at the point of entry what will be the value of the variable, right? I can add another statement which says variable set variable 1 to 50. Then in that case, let's say if I add this statement here, variable 1 to 50, my value is changed. I do something in the middle of these statements right now. Let's say I move my sprite and do whatever. It has changed the value of the variable. It's not in my control. It's not in the control of the block, right? So when you want to give the control to outside, and outside values can change, then you use a variable. When you want the control from outside, for example, you don't even want to consider what the value is coming out from, and you know it can change at any point in time, it's okay to use variable. But when you want your program to control, or your block to control the value, for example, here you're moving the steps and you want to change the value by 1 or 2, or you know variable count by any value. For example, let's say I say change step count by 1. In this case, when I'm using, let's say I add variable, what do you think is happening? What is the value of variable 1 after the execution of this program? So it was 100 here, 50 here, and then it entered this program. What is the value of variable 1?
50.
It is 50. Why did it not change here? First of all, with this program, would my sprite move to 50 steps? What do you think? Will my sprite move?
Yes.
Why would it move here? What is happening here? What is happening to step count here? What is the value of step count when I'm adding that as a variable 1? When I'm entering this block with variable 1, what's the value of step count?
50.
Sorry?
50.
50, right. So that is 50. It moves that 50 steps and then it changes the step count by 1. Why is my variable 1 value not being changed?
Yes.
Because this variable 1's context is outside. If we would have set, so when variable 1 came inside, it became an argument step count, and then it moved the steps, it changed the value of the step count, which is an argument, not a variable. So when the value of the argument was changed, it did not impact our variable. Our variable remained the same. Our variable was just passing the value. That's all it was doing, right? Had we used it as change variable 1 by step count, had this been our program, consider that, then in that case our value of variable 1 would have changed. But for now, what is happening is only your step count is changing. So what happened is, so when it entered the show message with variable 1, it copied the value to step count. It copied that value of variable to step count, and then step count worked it inside. And then step count changed, but it does not write back the value. Does that explain why it is not changing?
Yes.
Okay. So the moment actually you assign a value of variable at the top here, it just copies the value to the argument and then argument takes over. Unless and until you're using the variable name directly, for example, had I not done that, it does not impact the variable name. So when you're using your program, when you're writing your program, try to avoid using variables inside the step, inside the procedures, inside these blocks, unless and until you want to change their value. If you intend to change the value of variables in these blocks, do that. But if you do not intend to change the value of these blocks, just use arguments here. Does it make sense?